You never really know a person until there are millions of dollars sitting on the table between you. People talk about loyalty, about the bonds of friendship forged over late-night study sessions and shared secrets in cramped college dormitories, but all of that evaporates the second true, life-altering wealth enters the chat. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 2 years, I haven't had a life. I am a software developer. And when I say I haven't had a life, I mean my entire existence was reduced to a glowing grid of code, the hum of my overtaxed cooling fan, and the stale, recycled air of my apartment. I didn't date. I didn't go out for drinks. I barely saw the sun. I was building something revolutionary, an artificial intelligence logistics platform designed to optimize supply chain variables for mid-level manufacturing companies. It sounds dry to a layperson, but in the tech sector, it was the holy grail. It was a predictive engine that could save companies billions of dollars by anticipating supply chain disruptions weeks before they happened. I named it Aegis Flow. But this story isn't just about Aegis Flow. It's about my former best friend and roommate, Chloe. Chloe and I met during our freshman year at university. We were randomly assigned as roommates, a pairing that seemed doomed from the start. I was an introverted computer science major who practically lived in oversized hoodies. Chloe was a communications major with a meticulously curated Instagram aesthetic and an unquenchable thirst for being the center of attention. Yet somehow, we clicked. She pulled me out of my shell just enough to keep me sane, and I grounded her, helping her pass classes she otherwise would have failed. We stuck together through graduation and eventually moved into a cramped, overpriced two-bedroom apartment in the city. Over the years, our paths diverged dramatically. I worked grueling hours at a mid-tier tech firm, saving every penny so I could eventually quit and work on my own projects. Chloe bounced from one PR or marketing gig to the next. She hated the actual work, but she was deeply infatuated with the idea of success. She worshipped the startup culture, the Forbes 30 under 30 lists, the glamorous founder profiles, the TED Talks. She wanted the title of CEO and founder in her social media bios more than she wanted to draw breath, but she lacked the single most important ingredient, the drive to actually build something from the ground up. When I finally quit my job at 26 to develop Aegis Flow full-time, Chloe was ecstatic, not for me, but for the proximity to what she perceived as a startup journey. I spent my days hunched over my dual monitors, writing thousands upon thousands of lines of complex backend architecture. I integrated machine learning models, refined the neural networks, and built a sleek, intuitive front-end dashboard. It was grueling, agonizing work. There were weeks where I slept no more than 3 hours a night, surviving on instant noodles and black coffee. Chloe, meanwhile, appointed herself my unofficial hype woman. She would occasionally bring me a cup of tea, snap a candid photo of me working, always making sure to tag herself as an aspiring entrepreneur, and talk endlessly about how we were going to be rich. I always brushed off the we as a colloquialism. I was the one doing the work. I was the one writing the code. I didn't mind her living her fantasies vicariously through my grind. I thought she was just being supportive in her own performative way. I was naive. Breathtakingly, stupidly naive. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have fathomed, was that Chloe was watching. She wasn't just bringing me tea. She was hovering. She was learning my schedule, memorizing my passwords when I typed them, and absorbing the buzzwords I used when I tried to explain the platform's capabilities to her. She recognized that Aegis Flow wasn't just another generic app. She heard the way my voice trembled with excitement when the predictive model successfully backtested against real-world supply chain disasters. She knew it was a goldmine. Around the 18-month mark, my savings were completely depleted. I was living on fumes. I needed funding just to pay for the massive cloud computing power required to train the AI models. That was when I reached out to my uncle Marcus. Marcus isn't just my uncle, he's a titan in the venture capital world. He built a legacy out of identifying unicorn startups before anyone else even knew what they were looking at. I hadn't gone to him earlier because I wanted to prove I could build the foundation myself. I didn't want a handout. I wanted an investment based on merit. I pitched Aegis Flow to him in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city. I showed him the beta version on my laptop. Marcus is a stoic man, incredibly hard to read, but when he saw the dashboard light up with real-time predictive analytics, his eyes widened. He agreed to seed the remainder of the development with a private, secret six-figure cash injection. We kept it entirely off the books, drafting a private contract that made him a silent partner. I didn't even tell Chloe. I told her I took out a massive personal loan. I just wanted to keep my head down and finish the last 6 months of coding. Fast forward to the 2-year mark. Aegis Flow was finally complete. The beta testing was flawless. The code was pristine. I was exhausted, depleted, but euphoric. I was planning to take a weekend trip to a cabin just to sleep for 48 hours straight before beginning the grueling process of pitching to venture capital firms. I packed my bags, hugged Chloe goodbye, and drove out to the mountains. It was the first time I had left my primary workstation unattended for more than a few hours in 2 years. I returned on a Sunday evening, feeling somewhat human again. I walked into the apartment, dropped my bags, and headed straight for my desk to do a final review of the deployment servers. My monitors were dark. When I nudged the mouse to wake the computer, I was greeted with a login error. Not just my local machine. When I checked my phone, I saw a cascade of automated emails from my hosting providers, from GitHub, from AWS. Your master password has been changed. Your account email has been updated. Administrative privileges have been transferred. A cold, heavy knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Panic is a funny thing. It doesn't hit you with a scream. It hits you with a profound, suffocating silence. I sat there in the quiet apartment, desperately trying to reset my passwords, but every secondary authentication method had been altered. My repository, containing 2 years of my blood, sweat, and literal tears, was gone. Looking for something. I spun around. Chloe was leaning against the doorframe of my bedroom. She wasn't wearing her usual casual loungewear. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored blazer, her hair sleek and perfectly styled. She looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a business magazine. "Chloe, what is going on? I can't access any of my accounts." "Did we get hacked?" My voice was trembling, the panic finally breaking through. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a tight, practiced corporate smirk. "No, we didn't get hacked. I just transferred the assets to a more secure, proprietary server under my newly registered LLC." I stared at her, my brain refusing to process the words coming out of her mouth. "What are you talking about? What LLC?" Chloe walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a thick manila folder, tossing it onto my desk. Aegis Flow is a terrible name, by the way, too mythological. I rebranded. It's called OmniStream Logistics now. I filed the patents last week. The trademark is pending, but it's practically a done deal. The room started to spin. You stole my code." "Stole is an ugly word," she said, examining her manicured nails. "I prefer to think of it as a hostile takeover. You see, you're a great coder, but you have no vision. You have no charisma. You would have walked into a VC firm and bored them to death. You need someone with a founder's presence. I'm the face of OmniStream, and since all the intellectual property is now legally registered under my name, I am the sole founder." "You don't know the first thing about the backend," I screamed, finally finding my anger. "You don't even know how to restart the servers. You copied my work." "I don't need to know how the engine works to drive the car," she countered coldly. "I've locked you out of everything. The code is secure. I've already hired a freelance dev team to maintain the infrastructure once the funding comes in. You should leave, by the way. I'm breaking the lease. I have a meeting with a major venture capital firm in 3 weeks, and I need a better zip code to match my new status." She was entirely detached. There was no guilt in her eyes, only a ruthless, blinding ambition. She had watched me suffer, watched me pour my soul into this project, and had waited for the exact moment I turned my back to slit my throat. I didn't yell anymore. I didn't cry. I just picked up the manila folder. It contained copies of the LLC registration, the patent filings, and a heavily legally worded cease and desist letter warning me against claiming any ownership of OmniStream Logistics. She had planned this for months. I packed up my clothes and left that night. I checked into a cheap motel and just sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, staring at the wall. My life's work was gone. She had essentially legally assassinated me. But then, as the shock began to wear off, a tiny, sharp realization pierced through the fog of my despair. Chloe was cunning, but she wasn't smart. She had stolen the repository, yes. She had changed the passwords, yes. But she didn't write the code. She didn't know the architecture. And most importantly, she didn't know about Uncle Marcus. I picked up my phone and called him. It was 2:00 a.m. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus," I said, my voice eerily calm. "We have a problem, and by we I mean my former roommate." I explained everything. I told him about the lockout, the stolen code, the rebranded LLC, and the impending pitch she mentioned. I expected Marcus to be furious, maybe even shout or demand I call the police. Instead, he let out a low, rumbling chuckle. It was the sound of a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. "A venture capital pitch in 3 weeks, you said?" Marcus asked, his tone shifting into pure business mode. "Did she happen to mention which firm?" "No, just that it was a major player." "Well," Marcus mused, "if she's pitching an AI logistics platform in the city, and she wants big money, there are only about 4 firms that would even take the meeting for a $5 million seed round. Let me make some calls. Do not contact her, do not text her, let her think she has won." For the next 3 weeks, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I moved into my uncle's guest house. We didn't sit idle. Under Marcus's direction, I gathered every single shred of evidence I possessed. I had thousands of localized, time-stamped backups on an encrypted external hard drive that Chloe never knew existed. I had my original Git commit histories, my raw architectural diagrams drawn on napkins, and the paper trail of the silent partnership agreement between Marcus and myself, dating back 6 months. We compiled a dossier so thick it could have stopped a bullet. Marcus handed it all over to his personal legal team, a group of corporate lawyers who looked like they ate glass for breakfast. 2.5 weeks in, Marcus called me into his home office. He was pouring a glass of scotch. "She took the bait," he said, handing me a glass. "She reached out to Vanguard Horizons, but they passed. Then she went to Summit Capital. Passed. Finally, her broker managed to secure a pitch meeting. She's asking for $5 million for a 20% stake." "Who is she pitching to?" I asked, my heart pounding against my ribs. Marcus smiled, a terrifying predatory grin. "She's pitching to Apex Ventures, my firm." I froze. "Does she know you're the managing partner?" "She knows the name Marcus Thorne, I'm sure," he replied smoothly. "But she doesn't know my last name is the same as your mother's maiden name. She doesn't know you and I are related. To her, I am just a rich guy sitting on a pile of money she desperately wants." "The meeting is this Friday at 10 a.m. "What's the plan?" I asked, a dark sense of anticipation pooling in my chest. "The plan," Marcus said, taking a sip of his scotch, "is that we let her pitch. We let her stand up in my boardroom and hang herself with her own words." Friday morning arrived with crystal clear skies. I wore a sharp black suit, something I never would have worn during my coding days. I felt like I was putting on armor. Marcus and I drove to the massive glass and steel skyscraper that housed Apex Ventures in silence. When we arrived, Marcus had me wait in the private antechamber adjacent to the main boardroom. The wall separating us was made of smart glass, which he frosted so I could see and hear everything without being seen. At exactly 9:55 a.m., the boardroom doors opened, and Chloe walked in. I almost laughed out loud. She was dressed like a parody of a tech founder. A black turtleneck, tailored slacks, minimalist jewelry. She carried a sleek tablet and a confident, arrogant aura that radiated throughout the room. She was accompanied by a nervous-looking assistant carrying handouts. Marcus was already seated at the head of the massive mahogany table, flanked by 3 of his junior partners. He looked the part of the intimidating billionaire investor to perfection. "Miss Davis," Marcus greeted her, his voice devoid of any inflection. "Welcome to Apex Ventures. I am Marcus Thorne." Chloe extended a hand, flashing her best camera-ready smile. "Mr. Thorne, it is an absolute honor. I've followed your investments for years. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me regarding OmniStream Logistics." "The floor is yours," Marcus said, gesturing to the presentation screen. For the next 45 minutes, I stood behind the frosted glass and watched my former best friend lie through her teeth. It was a masterclass in sociopathy. She clicked through a beautifully designed slide deck, clearly created by an expensive design agency she hired with whatever credit cards she had maxed out, explaining the core concepts of the app. She used all my analogies. She used my buzzwords. She talked about the sleepless nights she spent conceptualizing the algorithm. She spoke passionately about her vision to revolutionize the supply chain industry. "When I was building the neural network architecture," Chloe said, pacing the room with faux humility, "I realized that the standard predictive models were vastly underestimating outlier events. So, I coded a proprietary subroutine to cross-reference global shipping delays with microeconomic shifts." She had practically memorized the elevator pitch I used to practice in our kitchen. It was sickening. But as the pitch went on, I noticed Marcus's junior partners asking slightly more technical questions. "Regarding that subroutine, Miss Davis, One of the partners asked, looking at his notes. How does the OmniStream algorithm handle the latency in API calls from legacy manufacturing databases? Do you rely on batch processing, or is it purely asynchronous? Chloe faltered. Just for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Well, the infrastructure is incredibly robust. We designed it to be highly scalable, so latency isn't really an issue our clients will face. She dodged the question perfectly with corporate speak. The junior partner looked unimpressed but let it slide. Finally, she concluded her presentation. She stood confidently at the head of the table. And that is why OmniStream Logistics is seeking a $5 million seed investment. We are completely proprietary, fully patented, and ready to disrupt a trillion-dollar market. I am happy to answer any final questions. Silence fell over the boardroom. Marcus sat completely still, his fingers steepled in front of him. He let the silence stretch. It stretched for so long that Chloe's confident smile began to twitch at the corners. The sheer psychological pressure in the room was palpable. Miss Davis, Marcus finally spoke, his voice dropping an octave, echoing off the mahogany walls. That was a deeply compelling presentation. Chloe relaxed slightly, her smile returning. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I put everything I have into this. I have no doubt you did, Marcus said slowly. However, there is a slight discrepancy in your technical documentation that I need you to clarify. Chloe blinked. Of course. What discrepancy? Marcus reached down and picked up a thick, leather-bound portfolio from the floor beside him. He placed it on the table with a heavy, resounding thud. You claim to be the sole founder and architect of this software, Marcus said. That is correct. I wrote the foundational code myself, she lied without hesitation. Fascinating, Marcus replied. He opened the portfolio. Because, you see, I happen to be a rather hands-on investor. When I find a project I believe in, I like to get involved at the ground floor. In fact, I provided a private six-figure seed investment to the true creator of this algorithm over 6 months ago. Chloe's face went entirely blank. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. I don't understand, Mr. Thorne. I assure you, there are no other investors. Oh, but there are, Marcus said smoothly. He pressed a button on a remote control resting on the table. Instantly, the smart glass separating the antechamber from the boardroom shifted from frosted to crystal clear. I was standing there, arms crossed, staring directly at her. If a human being could literally spontaneously combust from sheer shock, Chloe would have burst into flames right then and there. Her jaw actually dropped. She took a physical step backward, bumping into the presentation screen. Maya, she whispered, the word barely escaping her throat. Marcus stood up slowly, picking up a thick stack of legal documents from the portfolio. He walked down the length of the table toward her. Miss Davis, Marcus said, his voice now ringing with absolute, terrifying authority. My niece Maya is the brilliant mind behind the platform you attempted to peddle in my boardroom today. You stole her repository. You fraudulently registered an LLC. You locked her out of her own servers. And you had the unmitigated gall to bring stolen intellectual property into my firm and ask me for $5 million. Chloe was hyperventilating. She looked from Marcus to me and back to Marcus. This is a misunderstanding. We were partners. She surrendered the rights. Do not insult my intelligence, Marcus snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. He slapped the stack of legal documents onto the table right in front of her. This is a civil suit for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, intellectual property theft, and fraud. Furthermore, my legal team has already filed injunctions to freeze every single asset associated with OmniStream Logistics, your bank accounts, and your personal assets. Chloe stared at the papers like they were venomous snakes. But we aren't stopping there, Marcus continued, leaning in close to her. Because you crossed state lines while transmitting the stolen digital assets, and because you attempted to defraud a federally regulated venture capital firm for millions of dollars, we have also forwarded all evidence of your wire fraud and corporate theft to the FBI. They are currently looking into a criminal indictment. Tears, genuine tears of absolute terror, spilled down Chloe's face. The arrogant, slick, Forbes-obsessed founder was gone. In her place was a terrified criminal realizing her life was entirely over. Maya, Chloe sobbed, looking through the glass at me, her hands shaking. Maya, please, I'm sorry, I just wanted a piece of it. We can work this out, please. I didn't say a word, I didn't need to. I just reached over and pressed the button to frost the glass again, shutting her out completely. From the other side, I heard Marcus's voice, cold and final. The pitch is over, Miss Davis. My security will escort you out. I suggest you retain incredibly expensive counsel. The fallout was apocalyptic for her. The lawsuit absolutely crushed whatever delusions of grandeur she harbored. Because she had signed personal guarantees on the loans she took out to hire the design agents